kept have omitted income as an indicator. Now, coming to this, I think in many of these efforts, the positive side has been that these have served as excellent advocacy tools, many of the multidimensional indices, and they have also strengthened the debate on some of the very neglected issues of development. So we cannot ignore the importance of taking up these indices for their very real value in terms of the policy debate. They've also given on many occasions a new lease of life to the statistical systems, because suddenly the statistical systems, it is true, which I've witnessed across the 26 states where the state human development reports have been done, that the statistical system suddenly finds that the data that they compile in a routine manner is somehow become very important and now being used for policy purposes. So I think it is extremely important that we look at it. But at the same time, the negative side has been of the proliferation of indices, that there are ever increasing dimensions with each researcher, suggesting their own. The number of indicators has also proliferated, and most of them do bring them into a composite index. Sometimes it is not very clear what the composite index actually represents, what is the theory underlying the selection, which is not clear, what is the interrelationship between the indicators, and what is the weighting system that is adopted. All these, while it seems like a very scientific effort, there are value judgments that underlie each of the selection of the indicators, and that we need to be extremely careful about, because we have been talking about the values since the morning, and we need to be very sure as to what are the values that are embedded in the indicators that we choose. There is also confusion between stock and flow variables, between process and outcome indicators. So I think new guidelines are required on the selection of indicators, more analysis on what assumptions underlie these indicators, and so on. I would come to 2 or 3. There's also one other plea that I would make in the indicators, that many of the countries have moved beyond basic capabilities. So no longer is it necessary to look at elementary education and public health and so on. We need to move to the more advanced capabilities. Digital literacy, for example, becomes extremely important. So there is a range of indicators that we now are better fitted for the 21st century, and we have to move to those rather than adapt or adopt the same old indicators that we have using. There are 2 things that I would like to highlight here. One is the issue of missing indicators. While the number of indicators that we have, suggested have proliferated, data requirements have been enormous, and very often the statistical systems are never consulted prior to the drawing up of indicators. They come in as suppliers of these data on indicators, and they hardly know that these indicators are being formulated and being designed. So I think there is extreme importance to involve the statistical system right from the beginning of the selection of the indicators, the theory underlying them, and the data systems that will capture these indicators. And one of the issues is also that the new dimensions that we are looking at have never been quantified. We are looking at qualitative indicators, which now we are seeking to quantify them. And in the process, the issue has become extremely complex for the statistical system and for those of measurement. For example, in many of the countries, I won't go into the International Science Council and what it has said on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 indicators, but at the same time, we can see that even in many country reports, voluntary reports that have been submitted on the SDGs, they are reported only for some of the goals of the 17 goals, especially 12, 13, and 14, which are the new dimensions are missing. 12 on responsible consumption and production, 13 on climate change, on which we are all talking about all the time. 14 is on life below water. If these are the new dimensions for which we are seeking, data and indicators, and those have not been not available as of now, there's extreme need and urgent need to develop the methodologies, to advocate these for training and for finance to back up the statistical system. There is no point in expanding indicators and designing well-being measures if the national statistical systems cannot have the finances to capture these indicators. And these are much more expensive type of indicators to collect because they may require sample surveys, they may require perception surveys, they may require very many surveys. The third issue that I would like is on empty indicators. Very often, indicators do not capture what they are supposed to indicate. For example, life expectancy at one time was considered because life expectancy used to increase because of holistic health improvement in the population, whereas now it is due to vertical programs on infant mortality and maternal mortality, and the morbidity continues to remain while life expectancy has increased. So the indicator life expectancy may not always indicate a long and healthy life. Similarly, education, for example, is more dramatic. Average number of years of schooling may not indicate the learning of students, as several surveys of ASAR and others have shown. So we need to think about the indicators much, much more, and we need to back up the statistical system to collect these indicators. And I would also say that for the life index that we are thinking of, we need to carefully draw up the dimensions. The indicators need to be identified. The methodology of the index needs to be decided. And regarding the index or a dashboard of indicators, I don't think we should make an either or choice. An index is essential because it captures policy attention. I can tell you from the HDI, the Human Development Index, everyone talks of the HDI, though there's a dashboard of indicators, several other indicators that are there. At the risk of being reductionist, maybe an index is useful for policy purposes, but we should not ignore the analysis of a range of indicators, and we need to have a dashboard highlighted as well as and to the same extent as that of the index. I would then, last point that I would make and conclude here, to whom does this data belong? Who are the owners of this data? Are people just respondents, or do they own the data? I think we should make a move towards local data, localized data, enable people to understand their own situation and give the ownership of data to them as well. And somehow we have to find means of combining this local data with other systems of data. Otherwise, we would only be doing data and alienate people, because forever we are asking them for data, whereas they do not get a chance to use the data for their own benefit. I can give you an example of Chhattisgarh, and this is the last sentence that I'll speak, where the Human Development Report in Chhattisgarh state was formed at the village level, 17,000 villages, with the people responding to what the village, what is it their aspiration is, and what is it they expect from the government. There were village human development reports prepared, combined into district reports, and then to the state report. And much of the progress, the pace of progress in Chhattisgarh, I can attribute to the fact that people were sensitized to the issues in the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sita Prabhu. It has been very interesting presentation, and I think you have made very important point when we are bringing new indicators and demanding a lot of more information. There are no resources, and there is no participation from the statistical agencies, and suddenly they find something has to be produced, and now there is a problem. In any case, there are many other points which you have made. They are very relevant and important, especially the ownership of data, which is very important. Now, I'll request Professor Surya Narayana. He is a former professor of Indira Gandhi Institute for Development Research, Mumbai. Our colleague, we have worked together quite some time. Yes, I'll request Professor to help us understand the issue.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Dr. Ashish. After two very comprehensive presentations, I don't have much to say. Let me begin with a confession, because I have not really worked on, thought about what is beyond GDP. These are issues that have never occurred to me. But last night at 11 o'clock, I got an email from RIS saying that I should talk on this topic. Okay, I thought, let me just then wondering, what should I talk? What should be, I understand the whole morning, since morning I have been listening to concepts like inclusive growth, sustainability, marginalization, etc. One important thing which I always thought, okay, I'm going along with Professor Sita Prabhu, what she said, quite often we don't have a clarity of concept when we just use merge words. If you look at for example, India we have 11th fire, 10th fire plan for inclusive growth, 11th fire for more inclusive growth without defining what is inclusive growth. And I will tell you, I have also done a couple of UN missions for countries like Botswana, Brunei, and Somalia, etc. You know, when all these, particularly when I went first time to Botswana, first task they gave me is you should define inclusive growth because we have made a commitment to the UN to realize inclusive growth, but we don't know what it is. So define inclusive growth. That's what they told me. They told me. And similarly, I had similar was my experience with several other countries, Brunei, etc. You know, they make a commitment. We don't know what exactly is this concept. And since morning, we have been talking about inclusive growth. What exactly are we talking about inclusive growth? I can generally say that, you know, okay, now G20 is more than G7, so we have to worry about the poorest of the poor. Inclusive growth is important. In fact, there was a reference this morning. Somebody made a difference. He did not define what exactly means by that. Okay, these are the issues. So the one thing, and so that's why without concept, clarity of understanding, most important is information based. In fact, I have prepared the Million Development Goals report midterm evaluation for Brunei. I was meeting all ministries in Brunei. So morning, once I was sitting with the Ministry of Education, I was asking them information. You know, I want a dropout rate, school enrollment rate, etc. All this information because I have to write a report, MDD report for Brunei. So then they told me, no, we don't have it. But if you come in the afternoon, we'll give you. I was surprised. I said, okay, then I was very keen to know. How come then I was looking for some fast time series information. Morning, they don't have it. By evening, how they collect it? I was wondering. So evening, they gave me data. Then I asked them, how did you get this data? They said, we went to the UN site, FAO website, and everything, international sites. You know, international sites get everything. They give us all information, whatever we don't have. You know, this is the kind of same problem. You know, for instance, again, I was working for the government of Nepal. Again, on some UN mission for the government of Nepal, I was looking at poverty in the, if I remember correctly, 12th fire plan. Yeah, the base year was 2001. They had estimate of poverty 38%, and they wanted to bring down poverty from 38 to 30% in 5 years. But in 2 years, when they really conducted a survey, they found that poverty has already come down to from 38% to 30%, 32%. I said, how is that remarkable? In 2 years, he achieved the goal. Then what is the base year? How do you get this number? They said, we didn't have this number. We simply took the Bihar number and went about it. You know, in other words, you know, all these metrics of indicators, everything makes sense. We can have sophisticated principal component analysis, anything you can do it. But the question, this validity of authentication of the information base, it is the most important thing. That is what is bothering me. In fact, I am going to, this Routledge handbook, you know, Routledge is going to bring out a handbook of poverty in global south in there, where I have said that we don't, in India, we never knew what is poverty. Our NSS data, I have serious problem with that. You know, we always see it is a representative sample. That is true. Are the estimates of consumption distribution are representative? We don't know. There's a serious problem with that. So in other words, you know, when these are the serious problems, most often, you know, we have to work with the constraint that we don't have authentic information base. Sometimes, same thing what Professor Chitapur pointed out. Thanks to her, I was involved in the preparation of human development reports for Karnataka, second, and Maharashtra, almost all the reports. We had a serious problem. We didn't have data. And finally, as Professor Chitapur pointed out, you know, we have even worked out, taluk level human development indicators, everything for Maharashtra. But the question till now, they have not published it because Ministry of the Department of Statistics has not the capacity to authenticate or validate or finally certify that these estimates are valid. So under these circumstances, how do you really go about it? So that's reason. Okay, let me tell you my I will finish in 2 minutes. I will just tell you my story for in Botswana. But in Botswana, we didn't have any data. They had only national income estimate. So I tried to bring in economic theory. I wanted to show that, verify whether inclusive growth, whether the poor have really benefited. So I brought in economic theory. I said that suppose there is national income growth, if all sections of the society have benefited proportionately, or if the poor sections have benefited more than the rich, then in macroeconomic theory, we always say consumption function, marginally proportionate consumer is less than 1. The rich consume less than for a given increment in income and than the poor, and the poor people consume the entire increment in income. If so, then I would say that expect an increase, proportionally larger increase in mean consumption than in income. So what I said that sometimes we have to bring in economic theory. So we should maybe, apart from income growth rate, we should also bring in what is called elasticity of mean consumption with respect to mean income. Use it as a measure of inclusive growth. I said if this elasticity is more than 1, then I say it is inclusive growth. If it is less than 1, I said growth is not inclusive. So in other words, sometimes, we have to bring in economic theory, conceptual understanding, and empirical context also when we discuss these issues. It is not simply, I know, sophisticated econometric techniques is quite different. For example, I always cite, we have got a sense, Amartya Sense's poverty, distribution sensitive poverty measure, or the Foster-Thorbecke index, which is more distribution sensitive. But they're not empirically implementable because in the time series context, in spite of all their claims about distribution sensitivity, they cannot account for distributional impact of inflation. Hence, those indices don't make any sense other than nice analytical, constructions. That same thing, what I would say that is very important to develop some alternative measures from informed economic theory and practical empirical understanding. This is what I think I will submit here. I have many more things, but I think given time constraint, I will.
Thank you so much, Professor Suryanarayana. This is realized in everyday life. We find the difficulties. First, frameworks are put in place, and then people start looking for the data. The question is, when the framework are being developed, if the data is also, the data producers are also brought in, probably the point which is being made is always easier, and they can also advise what is possible and what is not possible. In any case, we move ahead. We have Dr. Kanhaiya Ahuja. He's a professor and head School of Economics, Devi Ahilya University, Indore. Professor Ahuja, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to RIS for this invitation. Honorable Chair, when I was growing, I was always thinking if I could have a magic stick in my hand and could remove poverty from my country. And when I was growing, I was looking at the numbers. Numbers were ranging from 3.5% to 5%. And I could also read people would call it a Hindu growth rate. And I always used to feel this is enough. This is enough to remove poverty. This is enough to remove inequalities in my country. This is enough to take care of all the pains of my countrymen. But then I realized that this model of development is not enough because this growth rate of 3.5% to 5% was not enough. And we all know how we shifted from the traditional concept of traditional modeling to a new model after 1991. And we thought that maybe the higher growth rate would take care of our pains, that would take care of our poverty, that would take care of inequalities, and so many other problems which the country was facing. And I absolutely agree with Professor when he was talking that these numbers are numbers and they do not reflect the reality. What has happened, when we heard in 2008-9 that India was shining at a rate of 9%, 10% growth rate, but what for the reality, we all knew that. So I personally feel that these numbers might reflect, the narration is that, everybody feels that higher growth rate is a good thing for country, but has it really taken care of the basic needs of our basic problems of our country? Still, rightly said by Sir, that 12th plan, we are still talking about inclusive growth. We're still talking about poverty. We're still talking about unemployment. We are talking about some basic problems of the country which we have been facing since 3rd, 4th, 5 plans. The problems are same, but still, I don't know how they have rather intensified. So growth model earlier before 1991 and the growth model after 1991 has not really taken care of the things which we desired. There have been a debate, you all must be knowing, a very famous debate between Bhagwati Prasad and Amartya Sen. Bhagwati Prasad said, no, this is the growth which would take care of the problems of our country, and where Amartya Sen said, so no, this is the entitlement which will take care of the pain of our problems. And we stand nowhere. Both models we have followed and we stand nowhere. So what we have shifted to? We have shifted to sustainable development goals. And how much growth is required for our country? Is 9% good enough? Is 10% good enough? Is 12% good enough? Some of the studies say that more growth rate is painful for the country. It is going to have a very severe impact on inflation, severe impact on many social factors in the country. So even achieving high growth rate is not a solution for any economy in the world. So my question is that we need to understand what are the basic core problems of a country, and one of the core problem which I personally feel which we have neglected. GDP might talk about the numbers, GDP might talk about the magnitude, but GDP has failed to talk about the quality of these indicators. We are not talking about we might talk about the enrollment ratio. The government is talking about the gross enrollment ratio. What about the quality of education? What about the quality of health? COVID-19 has exposed the health sector very, very badly. We hardly had anything. We were spending just 1.4% on health. We have seen many countries which are spending 17, 18% on health. And we all know what happened with COVID-19, how many dear and near people we lost because we have a very, very primitive kind of a health system in our country. After when reforms were taken in a couple of years back after COVID-19, this ratio had been increased to 1.8%, but still we have to travel a long journey. I mean, if we want to make education more viable, health more viable, all the systems more viable, then we need to really identify the qualitative aspects of development. We just cannot depend all the time on numbers, 7%, 8%. You know, as an economist, even also we present the same thing to the student in the class. Oh, economy is growing at a rate of 7%. But what kind of a, whether that growth rate is really taking care of the basic issues or not? So that's a big question mark. Another thing, yes, 5 minutes. One factor which we have not really taken care of is the ecology. One of the very important study which my respected Dr. Kavadia is there. We have done a study on how growth and environment, that matrix, and we have calculated quality of life and quality of environment. We have made an index for quality of life and index for quality of environment. And we have tried to see the states. We have taken 20 major states in the country, and we have tried to see the states which are performing good in terms of growth. Where do they stand in terms of environment? And those states in the country which are doing good in quality of environment, where do they stand in terms of growth? And you'll be surprised, even after 74 years of independence, we don't come across a single state in a country which is doing good in terms of quality of life, growth, as well as quality of environment. So this kind of development is not sustainable. And that is why we have been focused, we have shifted towards sustainable development goals. And what has happened over the last 2 years is that even in sustainable development goals, our ranking has declined by 4 to 5 points. We are ranking around 36 among 120 countries. So even our performance in sustainable development, reaching sustainable development goals, meeting sustainable development goals is very, very slow. A lot of efforts are to be, done. I'll just end with my couple of points here. There are, yes. Growth, on one side we talk about growth, but we say that in economy has increased. I mean, growth rate is increasing, but at the same time, if you look at the debt, which all over the world, that has increased. Inflation all over the world is increasing. Unemployment all over the world is increasing. Even the fiscal space, which almost all the government in the world used to have, that is shrinking. So these are the big question marks. Now, what kind of solution we can prescribe for to design a well-being index? I think we need to focus on one of the important things which my earlier speaker on online has spoken about. We have to have a proper integration between natural, human and natural resources. There has to be a proper integration. Otherwise, if this integration is weak, things would not work. Another is we might think of. I'm not very sure whether how far this green GDP would really work for a country like India. But yes, we can have some of the indicators of green GDP, and that could also play an important role. Another very, very important, which the king of Bhutan, we all know that gross happiness index, I don't know. We need to really go in that direction slowly, because that would give us some kind of a viable solution. So thank you so much, sir, for giving this chance to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kanaya Ahuja. It has been very interesting listening to you about various issues. We are primarily not only concerned about the measurement, but also the impact of measurement, how the measurement is going to help us. And probably we are leading the way to a social well-being measure. Probably that will be the right thing to go ahead, and a framework which takes into account all the issues which you are raising. And now we have not but the not the last but the least very important speaker, Dr. E. Hari Babu. He's a former professor of sociology, University of Hyderabad, India. Can you please take the floor?
Yeah.
Um, Going beyond GDP means going beyond economics, right? Let me make this statement and see, as a sociologist, how does one look at these concepts like LIFE, that L, capital L, small I, capital F, E, and also generally life and values. Values form the core aspect of sociological theory, sociological understanding, right? So let me begin my presentation. One second. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. Before we move on to this life for environment, let me say that we should understand what life means, human life means, or life of other non-human life forms mean. Life should be seen as having intrinsic value relative to none. It has to be recognized for its own value, right? That's how one should look at life. And human life should not be seen as an instrumental value. That is, it cannot be used as an instrument to secure gains, number one. That is why right to life is an inalienable right anywhere in the world. According to UN Declaration on Human Rights, it is a fundamental right, inalienable in any context. Now, this may be extended to other forms of life, including non-human forms of life. That's what takes us to environment and trying to protect other forms of life. So there could be differences in political values, political perspectives, economic perspectives that could differ, but life as its own intrinsic value. When you talk of value, it is related to the notion of desirability and undesirability. What is desirable way of doing things? What is desirable way of organizing things, and so on. Now, this is also related to the system of meanings that people hold about objects, events, and social practices and social interaction. For example, if you attach positive meaning to conservation of biodiversity, it gives rise to a set of corresponding social values and leads to social action to realize this value of biodiversity. Values themselves cannot be measured. I mean, we're going to discuss quite a lot on measurement. Values themselves cannot be measured because they're expressed in the form of desirability or undesirability. But the effectiveness of practices and policies related to values may be measured. These measures are empirical correlates of the value in question. What these correlates are, their validity has to be debated by peer group, and then a consensus has to be arrived at, as Professor Prabhu has pointed out, that when you build indicators, what is the theory that underlies these indicators, right? So it can't be done a priori. It has to be discussed in a peer group situation, and a consensus must be evolved. Then LIFE, value and well-being, life for environment and value and well-being. Three concepts, life for environment, value, and well-being are interrelated. We cannot have a good life if you do not subscribe to the value of biodiversity. We cannot have good life if you do not have food security, energy security, water security, and health security. These should be recognized. The SDGs recognize all this. We know all of us know this. These have to be built into the framework of global governance, and appropriate policies and policy instruments have to be evolved. The concept of life for environment is related to perceptions and experience of individual at an individual level, and public policies that aim to achieve food security, energy security, water security, health security, and equitable access to educational opportunities and clean environment. Attempts have been made to conceptualize the term well-being. I would like to mention that the most recent attempts, as we have listened to OECD work on this. Similarly, others have conceptualized. UK Office for Statistics also conceptualized and gave a list of 10 kind of items. Now, let me say that well-being has two levels. One is at individual level, and even at the individual level, there are objective kind of dimension and subjective dimension. Right? Objective dimension can be sort of measured because it relates to economic well-being of people, and then their access to education, access to healthcare, and so on. And there's a cultural aspect to this. Cultural aspect refers to affordable education, I mentioned, opportunities to participate in creative activities like production of scientific knowledge and fine arts and literature. Political dimension includes freedoms guaranteed by the constitution of a given country and participation in decision making. This can be quantified and measured. However, there is another social dimension. How does one understand social dimension of this well-being? Social dimension include interaction based on recognition of others' dignity, autonomy, and ethical actions that do not harm the other individuals. People say we should have good relations. What do these good relations mean? How do you translate good relations? I think these are the things that I would like to mention, that we should really, the social interaction must be based on recognition of others' dignity, autonomy, and ethical actions that do not harm them. Socioeconomic well-being stems from, as I said, food security, all the securities. Cultural security stems from access to affordability of education. 1 minute. Critical awareness about the world to engage in creative activities, I just mentioned. And measurement of well-being methodology. That's very important. People have pointed out the statistical system is not adequate to capture this well-being because it is.
Can you please conclude now?
Huh?
Can you please conclude now?
Yeah, just one. Two levels, subjective level and objective level. The objective level can be measured by using statistics, quantitative statistics, whereas subjective level can only be understood by interpreting their meanings, their motivations, and this is to be built into our methodology, right? It cannot be merely statistical indicators. Statistical indicators will never give you full picture, and one should also look at how people at a micro level, how do people interpret kind of facilities that they have, how do you interpret what kind of a view they have on good life. One must understand this, and then bring these inputs into policy making, right? I think perhaps that is when your statistical system can be improved, and this can go into policy making. I said the combination of these two methods are very important. One is quantitative statistical and the other interpretive method. So I'll stop here, and then questions I can take.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hari Babu. This was very interesting that you have brought a very important issue of perception. In fact, there has been a lot of debate on this question of perception. In the UN Statistical Commission, the issue of well-being is being considered. And incidentally, I had to attend one of the presentation of the director of the UN Statistics Division. And I asked two questions to him. Question number one, he said we are thinking of having a dashboard of 15 to 20 indicators. My question to him was, how do you decide about these 15 to 20? So if we can have some methodology by which you can decide, that can help. I know OECD has individual indicators and then further discussion and bring out the composite and all that. And the second question was, when we are talking of well-being indicator of OECD, there are a lot of perception indicators involved there. Whether that perception issue can be adequately scientifically addressed. These are the two questions which I raised to him. He did respond to it, but his position was that the statistical system still keeps away from the perception indicators. So there may be some other ways to look at it. But this is a very important issue which Professor Hari Babu has raised, that yes, perception is an important element of the human social being. And if we are not able to measure it, how do we go about it? And then how this overall thing should come. So ultimately, I think we have covered a lot of grounds. We don't have much time, but if people are still dying to say something, please go ahead. Two questions. Yes, please.
One sentence I would speak.
Yeah.
If you allow me, I liked one thing that you said. We need to find a good indicator, but also we need to take into account that they have to be applied. And here comes two experiences that I want to share, but I will be very quick, don't worry, on the fact that we are, in a certain sense, at the end of a phase, historical phase. Hegemonic was the GDP. We all perceive that is no more the case, but where is the new? And somebody from my country used to say, Antonio Gramsci, that when you are in this middle, the monsters can appear. And here are the two examples where the monster can appear. In the OECD, we had long discussion about social indicator in the 80s. 4 years of a committee that was working on what is the most appropriate moral indicator. Everybody of us will share that they were crucial. Then Thatcher won the election, and the social indicator exercise was killed. A second example that I would like to make, or a second consideration that I would like to report to you, is about, we have been discussing today about the importance of dealing with global public goods like the environment. And we all recognize that developing countries are facing constraints that are not justified simply because the rich countries have already polluted the environment. So we need now to redistribute, so to compensate. On what? On GDP? We are going to compensate? Is this the argument that we have to use? Obviously, will be a loss if that's the criteria. End of the example with the third one. I myself was dealing with a letter that I received at a certain point in time, was 2017, I think, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uruguay and the one of Barbados and Chile. They were saying, we are going to graduate from aid because our GDP, due to the increase of the price of raw material, has passed the threshold. We don't understand why, because accordingly with the SDGs, we are not developed at all. Can we discuss? This letter was sent to the DAC committee, which is deciding who graduates and who doesn't. And the DAC committee said, no, we don't want to discuss, which means that if we don't find solution, we will reapply GDP. Are we keen with that option? If we are not, let's also, and I really conclude, take into account one fact. We have Human Development Indicator, we have SDGs indicator, we have OECD indicators. All of those have been approved by all countries. Why they are not applied? Because there are interests against those indicators. So why, even if imperfect, we don't start elaborating something which is helpful for policy decision, not for a presentation of reality.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Whether you talk about 8% or 12% or whatever it is, the growth, there will be always a debate between growth and development. And whatever we have done so far, 8% GDP we had reached, now pandemic has brought it down. Again, we are moving. But the well-being part is still not taken care of. We still have to look into the basic things. Like, suppose I was very happy that Professor Sita Prabhu referred to village development reports. That's excellent. Because we started something called HDI, state level, district level. We should have gone to Panchayat level. Instead of consolidating our efforts and achievements, we jumped into something else. Now we always jumped in the bandwagon. That is the kind of things which we have been doing over a period of time. Look at the forest dwellers. Say, for example, I'm happy that Professor Amartya Sen has talked about entitlement. I wish that there also we should talk about access to natural resources. We should talk about the rights of the people, their entitlement. How do you say that? How do you say that our tribal communities have improved, our people who are, despite all this improvement, still a significant chunk of people are still at the bottom line. So that is where I think the challenge is there. SDG can still be integrated at the Panchayat level. Whatever you say still can be done because 600,000 villages people are there. So one should not forget, Delhi, Bhopal, China, not India. We should not forget that. We can all be academics and we can do a lot of economic theory, a lot of economic modeling, but what happens to the people at the bottom level? That is important, and that is where you should focus our attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You wanted to make a last sentence? I think then we conclude. Yeah.
Yeah. Important statistics, so when you do statistical survey, we go with a priori concepts, right? But when you do this interpretive kind of a work, ethnographic work, you understand what people think, how do they feel about various things, what is their view of good life. That gives rise to sensitizing concepts. This is very, very important. I think we have to move into this in this direction and employ this method at a community level, at individuals level, to understand subjective dimension of well-being. That's all I wanted to make.
Thank you so much. It has been a very interesting session and a lot of learning, but I understand the view in general is G20 should take lead, try to come up with a kind of a measure which takes into account the concerns which are raised in countries, and especially in the developing countries, and see to it, as Professor Sita Prabhu is telling, do provide adequate resources if you want to build such measure, because otherwise the kind of students experience has been that kind of experience we should not have. So we have a robust statistical system to capture it, and don't forget about the social aspect, which is very important. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Very kind of you. And I again thank RIS for this discussion.
Thank you.